Once upon a time, there was a young Inuit woman named Sedna. She lived in the far north and was known for her independent spirit. Many men sought her hand, but she was not interested in marriage. She had other dreams for her life. And so she denied the many men who sought to marry her. Because this was so unusual and so out of keeping with traditional ways, her people did not understand her and pressured her to marry. Her father, in particular, felt it was his duty to make sure that she had a husband who could fish and feed and care for her and for the family. So he brought many men from the surrounding villages for her to choose as a mate. Each time Sedna said no, and her father became more and more frustrated. Sedna felt the pain of being different, but she continued to follow her own inner knowing. And she watched and waited. One day, a mysterious stranger walked into the village. He wore a long black cloak with a hood pulled up over his head. Without knowing why, Sedna felt a stirring within her. She found herself drawn to him. When he asked her to go with him in his boat, she consented. Together they left the village and journeyed far, far away to a barren island out in the sea. After they landed on the rocky shore, the mysterious stranger pulled back his hood, and Sedna gasped and saw that he was Raven. With fear and trembling, she knew she was in the hands of the magician, the shaman, who knows the ways of the spirit world. Day after day, month after month, she struggled through the cold weather, the icy winds, and the loss of all that she had left behind. There was not much to eat other than the few fish Raven brought back from his hunting. But all the while, Raven taught Sedna the ways of spirit. After much time had passed, the villagers grew worried for her, not understanding where she had gone and why she never came back to visit her family and her village. Her father became afraid and decided he must go and rescue her from her fate. He paddled his kayak out to her island. When he arrived, Raven was off hunting for fish, and Sedna sat alone on the shore. Seeing her on this cold, barren island, her father insisted on bringing her home with him. He pulled her towards his boat. "No, father, I cannot go home," Sedna said as tears filled her eyes. Her father would not listen to her words and carried her into his boat. He paddled rapidly out to sea, heading towards his village. Raven, returning from his hunt, realized that Sedna was gone. He cawed in rage and flew high over the sea to find her. Raven circled over the waves and saw Sedna in the boat with her father. Summoning the spirit of the wind and the storm, Raven dove down by the boat and touched the tip of his wing to an ocean wave. The wind grew wild, and stormy waves rose and began to break over the sides of the boat. Sedna's father, seeing that it was Raven, became filled with terror. He knew the power of Raven, and he felt the strength of the storm. Fearing for his life, he cried out to Raven, "Take her! Take Sedna! She's yours, just spare me my life." And he threw his daughter overboard into the stormy sea. Sedna screamed and called out to her father, but to no avail. Frightened, she grabbed the side of the boat, trying to pull herself to safety. Her father took his paddle and hit her hands to keep her from getting back into the boat. Filled with anger and disbelief, Sedna again reached for the edge of the boat. Again and again, her father struck her fingers until they broke off and sunk slowly beneath the surface of the sea. Sedna looked down and saw that her fingers had turned into seals and whales, swimming off beneath the storm-tossed waves. Struggling to catch her breath in the cold sea and raging wind, Sedna looked towards her father's boat as it rocked wildly in the waves. She saw that there was no safety in the boat. She knew that she could not go home again. There was no home for her there. Letting out her breath, feeling her salty tears join the surging sea, she slowly sank beneath the storm-tossed waves. Deeper, deeper she dove, down, down beneath the waves and wind and storm. Deeper she sank, and the sea became quiet and dark and still. She began to feel her body dissolve. No longer bound by bones and skin, she felt herself become fluid, moving with the currents of the deep Arctic waters. She felt one with the sea, and the sea became one with her. Looking around her, she saw whales and seals and fish calling out to her, calling her by name. And Sedna, the maiden, was no more. And Sedna knew the magic and wisdom of the deep. And Sedna became the goddess of the sea. So what is the meaning of this story of Sedna? What is the meaning of the planet that is coming as a messenger to us in this time? There are many layers to this myth of the Inuit goddess of the deep sea. We learn in the story that Sedna, the young maiden, dares to be different from those in her community. She dares to listen to her own inner knowing that guides her to venture forth with this stranger who she discovers is Raven, the shaman, the teacher. So she is on her own journey of spiritual initiation. And so often when we follow our inner guidance, our intuition that's taking us into that journey of initiation, we step out in trust and often find ourselves in a situation that is beyond our wildest imagining. We cannot control the outcome. We're taken on a journey of initiation, just like Sedna was by Raven. She finds herself on a barren island, being taught by the shaman and teacher Raven, but completely cut off from her community. For the Inuit people, to be cut off from the community means death. She was risking death and going through her own metaphorical death and rebirth as she was in her own process of spiritual awakening. Her father, who's frightened about her whereabouts, comes to find her and bring her back to the village. And what we see is Sedna's awareness that once you've started on that journey of transformation, you can't go back. You may not know the outcome and you may not know where that journey is leading you, but you can't go home again. You can't go back to the ways of the past. We also see in the story what happens when we're faced with these larger energies, the storm that Raven sets off, when we get caught in fear, as the father did, then we get caught in survival mode. And we want to cling to what gives us some semblance of security, some sense of control. That is the time that we're in right now. And we're seeing around the globe all of these ways in which people are caught in fear or drama or uncertainty because of the changes and the transformation that we're all experiencing collectively. And for many of us, it's easy to get caught in fear or despair. And this story is saying we need to not get caught in fear. And we also need to not try to cling to the paradigms and the forms of the past that give us some illusion of security. Sedna tries to cling to the boat, and as her father is lashing out at her with the oar, she's realizing there is no safety in the boat in this overwhelming storm. She releases her grip on the boat. She allows herself to sink into the ocean, deeper and deeper. She surrenders to the transformation that she's in and the dissolution of her ego and her identity as she has known it. And her fingers, her broken fingers, become the seals and the whales and the fish. And eventually Sedna, the maiden, dissolves and becomes the goddess of the deep sea. This story is telling us that in this time of transformation, in these stormy times, we too